Welcome to a new deep dive. I want you to think for a second. Have you ever, looked at a list of warm leads people who literally raised their hands, gave you their email, or, maybe asked for a quote, and just wondered why 90% of them quietly ghost you?
Oh, yeah, it's such a common frustration.
Right. You
Yeah,
just sit there staring at your screen and you feel trapped in this brutal feast and famine cycle
exactly.
because one month your calendar is overflowing and then the next it's just completely empty.
Crickets.
Yeah, crickets. And it's incredibly tempting to treat that as a traffic problem, to tell yourself, oh, I just need to run more ads, or, I just need to grind harder to get more eyeballs.
Which is what everyone does, right? Yeah. But today, we're actually diving into a massive stack of sources that flips that entirely on its head.
Yes, we are. We're unpacking this comprehensive guide on sales strategy, and it is backed by some serious behavioral research. We're talking Harvard Business School, Gartner, McKinsey, Forrester, and the Rain Group.
It's a lot of data. But the core mission here today is to figure out the quiet psychology behind why strangers become buyers and, solve the central mystery of why rushing the process actually actively repels them.
Exactly, because it turns out losing those leads usually isn't a traffic problem at all, it's a timing problem.
Yeah, most professionals can, describe their product in a single polished sentence. But if you ask them to explain the psychological journey a stranger takes to actually buy that product,
Yeah.
they just blank.
Right. Okay, let's unpack this. Because to solve the mystery of this leaking sales funnel, we first have to understand where the buyer's mind is actually anchored.
You have the geography of the buyer's mind.
Exactly. And our sources describe the human brain as moving through three distinct stages, or rooms, before committing to any purchase.
Yeah.
And of course, the industry uses these terrible acronyms for them.
Oh, they're the worst. TOU, MOFU, and BOFU.
Yeah, just awful jargon. But jargon aside, they do represent a very rigid psychological sequence.
They really do. So, TOFU stands for top of funnel, right? That's the awareness stage.
Mm-hmm.
Then MOFU is middle of funnel. That's the consideration stage.
Right.
And then BOFU is bottom of funnel, which is the final decision stage. And the critical insight here isn't just, memorizing these acronyms. It's realizing that every single potential buyer who touches your business is standing securely in one of these three rooms.
And each room requires a completely different vocabulary.
Completely different.
So let's break down the psychology of those rooms. In that first room, 2FU, the awareness stage, the buyer isn't evaluating your product at all, are they?
No, not even close. They're really just asking themselves, is this a real problem worth solving? They're barely ready for the idea of a solution.
Right. And then if they do walk into the MOFU room consideration, the internal dialogue shifts. Suddenly it's, okay, which option actually fits my specific situation?
Yeah, and in that room, they are silently comparing you against all the alternatives. And this is key. That heavily includes the option of just doing nothing at all.
Doing nothing is always a massive competitor.
Always. And only after they clear that hurdle do they reach the BOFU room, the decision stage.
Right, where the question becomes, is this the safe, smart choice right now?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because at that point, logic has mostly done its job. They just need, confidence and reassurance to take that final step.
So the sources lean on this meal analogy, which I like. They frame awareness as the appetizer, consideration as the main course, and the decision as the dessert.
Good baseline.
It is, but I actually spin it a bit differently to show just how aggressive this feels in the real world. Because treating every stranger as if they're decision ready, which, let's be honest, is what we all do when revenue is tight and we panic pitch.
Oh, absolutely.
It is exactly like a waiter walking up to my table before I've even seen a menu, slamming the credit card machine down, and aggressively asking how I want to pay for my steak.
Yes.
I mean, I'm not just confused in that scenario. I'm actively offended. I'm walking right out of that restaurant.
That physical reaction you're describing is precisely what happens psychologically. Yeah. When you create that stage mismatch, you completely break what behavioral scientists call the trust ladder.
The trust ladder. Okay.
Right, because a stranger simply does not leap from mild curiosity to financial commitment in one single conversation. Trust has to be constructed in layers.
Right. You can't just skip steps.
Exactly. Rushing the sequence, handing them the check before the meal, it triggers a massive defensive response in the brain. It is the leading reason warm leads go cold.
Wow.
It isn't your pricing, it's the sequence.
Okay, I want to push back on that a little bit, actually, because I think a lot of people listening are probably pretty skeptical right now.
Sure, yeah.
We are so conditioned to blame price, right? Or like a competitor who's offering some steep discount, but you're saying the data points to sequence over price.
I am. Let's look at the Harvard Business School research on this because they've studied the buyer's journey extensively.
Okay.
And they found that premature selling at the awareness stage is one of the absolute strongest predictors of lost trust.
Premature selling.
Yeah. When you pitch to someone who is just trying to understand their own problem, you trigger this thing called psychological reactance. Their autonomy feels threatened, so their guard goes up. And honestly, often it goes up permanently.
Okay, let me play devil's advocate here. Let's say I run a roofing business, right? A bad storm just rolled through town, and I know people have leaks. If I get someone on the phone and I slow down to ask a bunch of too-fo-few awareness questions,
Right.
doesn't that just give them time to get bored? Like, won't they just hang up and call the guy across town who's aggressively pitching a $500 discount? Isn't dropping my price a faster fix to close a hesitant buyer?
I completely see why that's the instinct.
Yeah.
I really do. But if we connect this to the bigger picture of how trust operates, you'll see why it actually backfires.
Okay, how so?
Lowering your price rarely fixes a stalled funnel because the discomfort the buyer is feeling isn't actually about the dollar amount.
It's not.
No, it's about feeling rushed. Remember, a broken funnel is a timing problem, not a demand problem.
Oh, I like that. A timing problem.
Right. If a buyer feels pressured before they finish their own internal consideration, suddenly dropping your price doesn't make you look like a good deal.
It makes you look desperate.
Exactly. It makes you look incredibly desperate. It triggers a whole new set of questions for them, like, wait, why are they discounting so fast? Is something wrong with the service?
So you accidentally introduce even more friction just by trying to bypass the natural process.
Precisely. And analysts at Gartner and Forrester back this up entirely. They point out that modern buyers complete a massive amount of self-guided research before they ever talk to a human being.
Right. They're Googling everything first.
Yeah, the actual decisions are happening in the shadows.
Yeah.
Your top-of-funnel content, your educational materials, that is doing way more heavy lifting than your final pitch.
And McKinsey's data mirrors this too, right?
Yes, showing that buyers increasingly prefer digital self-serve research in that middle stage, specifically to avoid early sales pressure.
Which is fascinating. And the Rain Group's data on top-performing sellers fits right into this as well. They found that top performers do not dominate early conversations with, like, bold claims and guarantees.
No, they don't.
They spend that early middle funnel stage purely asking questions. They give the buyer the space to arrive at their own conclusion, rather than just dragging them across the finish line.
Because neurologically, when a buyer answers a question, they take ownership of the idea.
Oh, that makes sense.
Right. If I tell you my product is best, you naturally defend against it. It's just human nature.
Yeah.
But if I ask you a well-placed question that leads you to realize my product is best, well, suddenly it becomes your own brilliant idea.
I love that. Let's bring this down to earth, though, and look at what this actually looks like in the trenches.
Yeah.
The sources highlight some real-world stories that perfectly illustrate the toll this takes on real people. Let's talk about Sarah.
Okay, Sarah's story is great.
Yeah, she ran a small consulting business, and she had steady traffic to her website, a decent email list, a really great service, but her calendar of actual sales calls just kept shrinking.
Right. And her reaction was the standard panic response that we all have.
Total panic.
She assumed her offer was the problem. She stayed up late, tweaking her pricing tiers, rewriting her core pitch, just trying to make the offer irresistible.
But the needle didn't move at all.
No, because she was treating a symptom, not the disease.
Right, and she eventually sat down and mapped her content by funnel stage, and she realized something pretty terrifying.
What was it?
Almost everything she published was bottom of funnel.
Ah, yeah.
Every email, every single social post was just pitch heavy, aimed at strangers who hadn't even confirmed they had a problem yet.
She was stuck in a permanent state of handing out the check before the meal.
Exactly. So the fix wasn't changing her price. She just added simple, new pitch, top of funnel education, and then she built a middle of funnel comparison resource.
And she kept her original offer exactly the same, right?
Exactly the same. And her calendar filled up. She didn't work harder. She just aligned her conversation with the room the buyer was actually standing in.
That is a perfect example.
And then you have Michael, who worked in home services, and I think, honestly, a lot of listeners will relate to Michael.
Oh, definitely.
He's a natural talker, confident, charismatic, and he could launch into an incredibly slick pitch within the first minute of literally any conversation.
He used urgency, he offered guarantees, he sounded like a total pro.
Total pro. But here's where it gets really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
He generated a ton of initial interest, but when it came time to actually sign the contract, everyone just vanished.
Which is such a brutal irony for him, because Michael thought his ability to confidently pitch on command was his biggest strength.
But the data shows it was his fatal flaw.
Yep. His opening minute was purely BOFU, language decision stage urgency, but aimed at people who didn't trust him yet.
He was skipping the consideration room entirely.
Entirely. Once he learned to just bite his tongue, start with diagnostic questions, and present honest options before ever making a hard offer, his close rate soared.
These two stories systematically dismantle a massive myth in business, don't they?
They really do. The idea that more volume fixes a weak funnel.
Right. I just need more leads.
Yeah, but pouring a higher volume of strangers into a stage mismatch doesn't solve the leak. It just multiplies the rejection.
You're essentially paying money to drive people away at scale.
Exactly.
So the multi-million-dollar question is, how do we actually build this stage alignment into our daily routines?
Right.
We know we shouldn't act like early Sarah or Michael, but old habits die hard. The sources do provide a highly practical playbook for this. But rather than just reading a list of steps, let's talk about the journey of implementing this.
Yeah, because it starts with an audit, which is often a very uncomfortable mirror to look into.
Audits are always painful.
They are. You literally have to pull up your last 20 emails or social posts or recorded sales calls and honestly label them.
Label them how?
Like, ask yourself, are these building awareness? Are they helping with consideration? Or are they just pushing for a decision?
And as with Sarah, most professionals discover they're aggressively pitching to people who just aren't ready.
Right. So the first major behavioral shift happens at the top of funnel.
Okay, the TOFU stage.
Yeah. The strategy here is creating one clear piece of content a week that teaches something valuable with zero pitch attached.
Zero pitch.
None. No call me today at the end, no links to buy, just pure patient education.
And the research shows this patient nurturing consistently outperforms one-time pressure, right? Because it lowers the buyer's threat response.
Exactly. Then you transition to fixing the middle of funnel.
The MOFU stage.
Right. This is where you build a simple, honest comparison resource. Something that helps a buyer weigh their options, including your competitors, without exaggeration.
Okay, I have to stop you there.
I knew you would.
Building a resource that honestly compares my product to a competitor. Like actually mentioning other options by name. I can hear business owners screaming at their speakers right now. Doesn't that just invite the buyer to leave and buy from someone else? That feels like commercial suicide.
I completely understand why it feels terrifying. It goes against everything we're taught. But the psychology behind it is fascinating.
Okay, sell me on this.
Research shows that comparison content builds unparalleled trust.
Unparalleled?
Yes. Why? Because you're treating the buyer like a capable adult. It is the ultimate confidence play.
Okay, explain the mechanism there. Why does the brain reward that?
Because buyers aren't stupid, right? They're already doing the comparison in the shadows anyway.
True. They have 5 tabs open anyway.
Exactly. So when you preempt that by saying, hey, here's what we excel at, and here's a specific scenario where another option might actually fit you better, you instantly neutralize their defense mechanisms.
Wow.
You transition from being a salesperson with an agenda to being a trusted advisor who's just helping them navigate the consideration room. You own the narrative.
That reframes everything. You aren't losing a sale. You're winning the role of the expert.
Exactly.
And then for the bottom of funnel, the decision stage, the playbook emphasizes removing hidden friction.
Right. Things like unclear pricing pages, confusing next steps, or forcing them to create an account before checking out.
Oh, I hate that.
We all do. Or even just slow reply times. These quiet friction points kill decisions that the buyer had basically already made.
Because at the bottom of the funnel, your job isn't to add more persuasion. The persuasion is done.
Right. Your job is just to clear the path.
So the playbook also shifts how we view tracking. Tracking volume, you know, how many leads you get, that hides the real problem if you aren't tracking where they drop off.
Exactly.
And for the ones who do drop off, the playbook suggests a gentle re-engagement sequence. Because a stalled lead isn't necessarily a lost lead. Usually it's just a mistimed one.
Yeah, sending a no-pressure check-in a few weeks later often reopens doors that you assumed were nailed shut.
Which requires reviewing your whole funnel monthly. Because buyer behavior isn't static, is it?
No, not at all. A funnel that matched their psychology perfectly 2 years ago might not match how they make decisions today. It's a living ecosystem.
Executing this requires real self-awareness, though.
Deep self-awareness.
Skills like stage labeling, which is literally pausing mid-conversation to ask yourself, wait, which room is this person in right now?
Yeah.
Or designing conversations to lead with curiosity instead of just reading off a script. It requires deeply active listening, which, sounds like something from a freshman communications class.
It does sound a bit cliche.
But poor listening is the hidden killer of trust.
It really is the foundation. But here's the thing. Even with a flawless playbook and the best intentions, our own internal psychology fights against us.
It does. We revert to bad habits under pressure.
Always. Which brings us to the mindset shifts required to actually maintain this alignment long term.
Right. The overarching shift is moving away from that internal monologue of, I need to convince this person, to, I need to understand where this person is standing.
Exactly. This raises an important question, though.
Yeah.
Why is that so hard?
Yeah, why is it?
Well, how you struggle with that shift depends heavily on where you are in your career journey.
Oh, right.
The sources actually map this out by career stage, which reveals a lot about our hidden motivations.
Let's go through those.
Okay, so if you're early in your career, say your early 20s, like 22 to 28, your biggest psychological hurdle is usually the fear of rejection.
Meaning you just want to rip the Band-Aid off.
Yes.
You pitch immediately because living in the ambiguity of the MOFU stage, that consideration phase, is just too anxiety-inducing.
Totally. You'd rather get a quick no than sit in the discomfort of a slow maybe.
Spot on. And then what happens?
Then, as professionals move into their late 20s and early 30s, they fall into the comparison trap.
Comparing yourself to the top performers on the team.
Right. You look at the raw, charismatic talent of top performers, and you get discouraged. But the behavioral research points out that relentless consistency in funnel awareness, not innate charm, is what actually produces long-term, steady results.
That is so encouraging. Okay, what about when you hit the management stage? Say your late 30s to mid 40s.
That's where it gets dangerous for the whole company.
Really?
Yeah, if you're leading a team, your hidden funnel habits quietly become your team's standard operating procedure.
Oh, wow.
Right. If you have a habit of rushing the decision stage because you're stressed about quotas, your team will mirror that pressure. Your personal ceiling genuinely becomes the entire department's ceiling.
That is a heavy responsibility.
It is.
And for the veterans, the 45 and older crowd who've been doing this a long, long time.
Well, for them, the digital landscape can feel incredibly alien.
Yeah.
With all this talk of, dark social and automated funnels.
Yeah, it changes so fast.
But the sources note that your decades of sitting across the table, reading real human reactions, that is your biggest asset. You just have to apply that intuition to the digital stages.
Which brings up a critical reflection point for anyone listening right now. Which of these mindset traps are you currently caught in?
Right.
Are you letting the anxiety of rejection force you to hand out the check before the meal? Or are you ignoring the friction in your own process because you're too busy obsessing over a competitor's glossy ads?
Identifying your own psychological block is really the first step to clearing the leak.
So, wrapping this all together, whether you run a small business, you're a freelancer, or you're just trying to pitch a radically new idea to your department head, the psychology of unfamiliar decisions is universal.
It never changes.
The brain moves from curiosity to comparison to commitment. You simply cannot skip a step. Trust is built in sequential layers, and your job is to guide them safely through each room at their pace, not yours.
It completely changes how we view human interaction in a business context, doesn't it?
It really does.
But I want to leave you with one final, slightly provocative thought to turn over in your mind.
Okay, let's hear it.
All the research we unpacked today focuses heavily on how buyers move forward through these rooms, transitioning cleanly from awareness to consideration to decision.
Right.
But consider the psychology of what happens when a buyer moves backward.
Backward.
Yeah. Imagine a buyer reaches that final BOFU stage.
Yeah.
They're in the decision room. They're ready to commit. But suddenly, they encounter a spike of hidden friction.
Like a bad checkout page?
Maybe it's a confusing contract, a surprise fee, or even just a sluggish response to a really critical email. When that happens, they don't just pause in the decision room.
What do they do?
That friction shatters the illusion of safety. It often forces their brain to regress all the way back to the consideration room.
Oh, wow.
Suddenly they're questioning if this is the right choice at all. Think about the last time you abandoned an online shopping cart.
Happens all the time.
Was it the price? Or was it a sudden spike in friction that broke your trust right at the finish line? Friction doesn't just delay a decision. It actively unravels the trust you spent weeks building.
That is something to seriously evaluate the next time you look at your own processes. We started today talking about the mystery of the 90% who quietly ghost you. Well, now you know why.
Yeah.
It isn't because they didn't want the solution. It's because you opened the door and immediately asked them to sign a contract before you even offered them a place to sit. You have to let them step inside and get comfortable first.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.